Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And Giga Maggie.
Howdy, welcome to Mays MasterCast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Interim Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs, here with your ridiculously amazing host, Ben Wiggins.
Thanks, Shannon. That's very kind of you. Per usual, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
It's a beautiful day in Aggieland.
Like the most beautiful.
It's really beautiful outside today.
Yeah, it doesn't get better than March in Aggieland.
Yeah.
Ryan and I celebrated our 10th anniversary this weekend.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Pretty crazy.
What date is your anniversary? I need to save that.
It's on the 12th. So this is the cool part, though. It's March 12th, and we got married at 5 p.m. on March 12th in 2011. And at 5 p.m. on March 12th in 2021, I was sitting on Kyle Field watching a graduation. So exactly 10 years to the minute of getting married on Kyle Field, I was sitting on Kyle Field at graduation. It was pretty cool.
That is really cool.
Everyone asked if I was going to smuggle Ryan into graduation, which I did not, but he could have fit in my regalia with me, and that would have been fun, but we didn't go that route.
All right. I have saved your anniversary in my phone, and it's easy to remember because it's the day after my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday. That's right. And you got to go on a trip for your birthday, didn't you?
I did. Maddie spirited me away to Fort Worth. Her parents took Brielle for a few days and we got to get away as a couple. We also went to our dear friend Trisha Heron's wedding to Jake Markle. Congratulations, Jake and Trisha. So it was a beautiful wedding. Really enjoyed being there. But yeah, we got away to Fort Worth for a little bit. And another shout out, we stayed at the Azalea bed and breakfast built in the 1940s. And Richard and Martha from Azalea, thank you so much for welcoming us into your home. It's a really, really beautiful place. And the history there, we heard so many stories this past week. If you said like, you're going to spend a week or 3 or 4 days at a bed and breakfast, and you'll probably spend 6 hours in conversation with the owner of the bed and breakfast, I would have said, I'm not sure, but coming out of it, it was amazing. They're cool. Such interesting people. We had such a good time. So Richard and Martha, love to you as well.
Awesome. Well, today on the show, we have Clay Bretches serves as the Chief Operating Officer of Apache, and he is the CEO and president of Altus Midstream, a controlled subsidiary of Apache. So 2 big roles for Clay that he talks about on the show. Previously, Clay served as the president and CEO of Sendero Midstream. He served in that role since 2014 and in various leadership roles at Anadarko for 14 years prior to that. From 2005 to 2010, he served the position of Vice President Marketing and Minerals, leading Anadarko's worldwide marketing team for crude oil, natural gas, and natural gas liquids, and was instrumental in the formation of Western Gas Partners, a midstream MLP. Earlier in his career, Clay led the crude oil marketing and midstream operations for Vaster Resources and worked as an engineer for ARCO on various drilling, completion, and reservoir engineering projects in West Texas and the Mid-Continent. You'll hear Clay talk about in the episode how he has lots of petroleum engineers in his family, and Clay is one of those, a petroleum engineering major from Texas A&M University. He was a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, straight out of Texas A&M, and served in various leadership positions in the U.S. Army Reserve. Clay serves on the advisory council of the Electric Power Research Institute and is the past board of directors president of the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation Gulf Coast chapter, which he talks about in the episode and what inspired him to join that board. Please welcome Clay to the show.
And he's a football player too. Let's not forget that part.
Oh, that's right. He and Ben share that.
Football. Yeah.
Great. Enjoy the episode.
Enjoy.
We welcome Clay Bretches to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. It is our pleasure to have you on the show. And how was your weekend?
Weekend was great. I went up to our ranch in Oklahoma and did some work on some cows and then brought back a bunch of beef last night. So I'm willing to share. I've got 475 pounds of beef in the freezer right now. So it was a big day to bring all that meat back from Oklahoma.
I'll get with you after the show. happy to help out in that respect.
Good.
Where did you grow up?
So, I was born in Odessa, Texas. So I'm a native Texan. But then I moved away when I was 8. We moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I went to part of my elementary school education was there, then went to junior high. And then we moved to Shreveport, Louisiana, my high school years. Well, I became an Aggie, but it was an indirect path of becoming an Aggie. I went to Lamar University in Beaumont first. And I played football at Lamar, severely damaged my shoulder, which I just had replaced a few months ago, by the way. Severely damaged my shoulder. And I said, okay, that's the end of my football playing. And I really want to go to Texas A&M. I wanted to be a petroleum engineer at Texas A&M. So I transferred and was there my sophomore through my senior years. So that's how I ended up at A&M.
What position did you play?
I was an outside linebacker. Nice. I was about 40 pounds heavier, Ben. Ate like a horse and lifted a lot of weights and kept that weight on. But I have definitely gotten thinner as time has gone on.
Yeah, I've lost a little weight since my playing days as well. How many in your family growing up?
So it's just my brother and myself. My brother was a chemical engineer at Texas A&M. So I've got a long line of Aggies in the family. My dad was a petroleum engineer from Texas A&M. My uncle was a petroleum engineer at Texas A&M. I married an Aggie. I have a son who just graduated from A&M, who's a petroleum engineer, and he's working for a bank here in Houston. And I have a daughter that was a geologist. She went a different path. She went to the University of Texas, but that was all good. She married an Aggie. And so I have a son-in-law that's a petroleum engineer. I'm surrounded by petroleum engineers.
Right. And you mentioned that your dad was as well. Was that what he was doing when you were growing up?
It was. So I was always around the oil and gas business. He was a engineer for a company that no longer exists, Arco Oil and Gas. And then he went to work for a big drilling company, which is still around, Noble Drilling. And he did a variety of jobs there, mostly in leadership and management.
What was your very first job?
My brother and I delivered papers in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we'd get up, we delivered the morning paper in Tulsa. We'd get up about 4:30 in the morning and we'd roll our newspapers and we would walk our route. We didn't ride our bike and throw papers. We'd walk it. And the reason we did that is we would put the paper, we'd walk up to people's doorsteps. We'd put the paper so that when they opened their door, the paper would fall into the house. And the reason we did this, Ben, was so that we would get big tips because people love not having to go out in their house slippers to get their newspaper. Just being able to open the door and have that newspaper right there was beautiful. And at that time, almost everybody took the newspaper. So you were really delivering door to door to door. It was really, pretty easy to do it. I witnessed a couple of car thefts while I was rolling newspapers because we'd bring in the newspapers, we'd roll them, put them in our paper bag, and we'd walk. And so a guy down the street, first time this happened, somebody came and stole his car about 4:30 in the morning while I'm sitting there rolling papers. Yeah. And and the guy comes out of his house once he realizes what has happened, and he's irate with me for not having stopped the car thief. And, all I have are rubber bands and newspapers. And I didn't even know that somebody had stolen a car. Well, strangely enough, they recover the car. It had run out of gas. They recover the car. They bring it back home. And I'm telling you, the very next morning, I'm out there rolling newspapers, putting rubber bands on them. And sure enough, the same car thieves that had stolen it the day before came back and stole it again with a full tank of gas. And the guy never did get his car back. And he was furious with me because I had witnessed both of these situations, but it's like, what are you going to do? You're 12 years old and I can't stop a car thief, right? But he was mad at me.
I'm 38 and I don't know if I could stop a car thief. Give us 60 seconds on your road from Texas A&M through to today as president and CEO at Altus Midstream and chief operating officer at Apache Corporation.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I had a great education at Texas A&M. It was wonderful. Went to work for a large integrated oil and gas company out in West Texas. Married my beautiful wife from A&M. She was a couple years younger than me. So when she graduated, we got married. And we moved. We were in Midland, Texas. Got an executive MBA from the University of Texas. I'd fly into Austin on the weekends. From there, received that MBA degree from Texas, Arco decided I might be better off doing something more business oriented. So I went to work in the marketing group. Ran the crude oil marketing group for Arco, and then for Vastar Resources, which was spun off of Arco. It was a spinoff that was IPO'd from Arco's domestic assets. Both Vastar and Arco were acquired by BP in the year 2000.
Okay.
And then I went to work for Anadarko. And so I worked there for 14 years, and it was great. 14 years, ran the marketing group, ran our E&P services division, exploration and production services division. That was a great gig. And then I was approached by private equity to start a midstream company, which I did. And we built a lot of natural gas infrastructure in southeast New Mexico. We were getting ready to sell that company, which is kind of the private equity model. You build it, you sell it. We were getting ready to sell that company called Sendero Midstream. And Apache came to me and they said, hey, we just IPO'd a midstream company called Altus Midstream. Would you like to run it? And I said, well, sure. We're selling this company. I'd be happy to do that. So I came over to Apache and started running Altus Midstream. Did that for a year. And then Apache said, well, we like what you're doing there. Could you run our global operations for us as our chief operating officer? And I said, sure, be happy to do that as well. So today I have two jobs. I wear two hats. I wear the CEO of Altus Midstream hat, and I also wear the chief operating officer hat for Apache.
In terms of leadership, how has your approach to leadership changed with the pandemic and the oil and gas industry fluctuations that have rolled out of that? How has leadership changed for you?
One thing I hope that so many of us have recognized, just like right now, we're having this virtual meeting. I'm not there live in your studios. We're having this opportunity to discuss my career, and thank you for asking me to do that. But we're doing it virtually, right?
Yep.
And we have found that so much of our business can be done virtually. And so one of the great leadership lessons to me, because leadership involves communication, it involves setting and direction, it involves actionable items, it involves holding people accountable. All of that can be done virtually. You can do it just like this, where we're face to face. You can do it over the phone. You don't always have to be in person. So one of the things that we learned in this pandemic, because as many who follow the oil and gas business know, oil and gas prices fell precipitously once we realized what we were in for with this pandemic, because global demand for oil and gas went down substantially. Still had to lead, still had to run operations around the world. We have operations in the North Sea. We have operations in Egypt. We have operations in South America, West Texas, and the Gulf of Mexico. So we have to be able to communicate with all those people, but we had to do it from our homes. Our workforce was still out in the field, but we had to have that communication. So I'd say the one thing we've really learned in this pandemic is that we can communicate without having to be there in person. And we can touch a lot more people virtually by having these virtual sessions and being able to have face-to-face conversations with anyone around the world.
What's the single moment that sticks out to you in terms of leadership over the last year as you talk about this, as you talk about the pandemic, all this virtual?
Well, I tell you, once we realized how bad it was going to be, and we actually saw oil prices go negative, there was a vast realization by us and by many, that we were going to have to do something drastic in order to just survive as a company.
Yeah.
So we immediately announced the cutting of our dividend, which was substantial. We immediately cut our capital programs. And then we had to make some really hard choices. We had to cut our costs substantially. And we ended up cutting costs to the tune on an annualized basis of about $400 million. That was tough because it involved people as well as cutting expenses, right?
Yeah.
So there were some really tough decisions. And so, when I think about a defining moment, we clearly knew what we had to do. It wasn't something that anybody wanted to do, but we knew that our survival depended on it.
One of the values at Apache reads, foster a contrarian spirit.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a story that illustrates this value and what it's about?
Well, let me tell you about the value and the way that I embrace this.
Yeah.
And then I'll try to take that into a story. But to me, a contrarian spirit is something that I often term technical tension. I like to have debate. I love to have debate with others. I love that my group can debate one another, that we're not all in lockstep. It's diversity of thought, and it's through diversity of thought that you have strength in decisions.
Yeah.
So I really do love that aspect, but you have to be able to have the debate, and you have to have an environment that fosters that type of debate. And I've been in company cultures, where if you didn't follow exactly what people at the top wanted you to do, then you were seen as an outcast. You were pushed out. You weren't in the conversation. You were non-compliant. To have a contrarian spirit and to have technical tension, you actually want to have the debate, and you want an environment that embraces debate.
Right.
So that's something that we try to do here. I want to foster that environment where we can have a passionate debate over whatever the subject matter may be, but it has to be respectful. And that's the key. If it gets personal and people go off and they pout and they don't talk to one another again, that's bad. You didn't create the right environment. But if you openly discuss, we want to have a contrarian spirit. We want people to bring up ideas that aren't necessarily in the mainstream. We want to have that technical tension where we're always challenging one another. That's a great atmosphere. That is a great work environment. When you can have that, to me, that is the pinnacle of company culture, to be able to achieve that, have that debate, open debate, respectful debate, be able to walk off and make the very best decision based on that debate in what was the best argument and whatever the subject matter may be.
You have served previously as the president of the board of directors for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, the Gulf Coast chapter. What instigated your involvement in this organization?
Well, when my son was 12 years old, I have 3 children then, and my middle son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 12. And that was just such a blow to me and my wife. That's a huge event because that's something that you never get over. It's not a disease that can be cured, and it's very difficult to manage. And so, you come to these points in your life and you say, well, I can wallow in self-pity and denial and anger, or I can do something about it. And so what I decided I wanted to do was to deal with this disease through research. And I wanted to be part of an organization that was dedicated to researching type 1 diabetes, cure, prevention, and therapies around the disease. Mm-hmm. And so the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation is just that type of an organization. All of their money goes towards researching various therapies, various cures, various preventative ways to deal with type 1 diabetes, which is basically the body's immune system attacking the pancreas and killing its ability to make beta cells, which produce insulin.
Right.
And so I've been involved with that ever since. It's been great. We've raised a tremendous amount of money. But outside of raising money, because there are a lot of organizations that raise money, but we have made real progress. We've seen real progress in the field of various therapies. Curing a disease is very difficult, and we know that, and that is a very long road. But being able to create therapies so that people are able to live their lives normally without fear of not being able to wake up in the morning because their insulin has gone too low.
Sure.
Or conversely, I shouldn't say their insulin, their blood sugars have gone too low. because they've had too much insulin, or their blood sugars have gone too high and they end up in the hospital. So those are the things that we're working on right now. We've made some real success and some real progress in therapies that will allow people to live their lives much more normally than they would have before. So we're raising money, but the money is going towards something that is truly creating better lives for people who have type 1 diabetes. And there are millions in the United States.
Yeah. You also mentioned prevention earlier. Can you tell us about how the JDRF is moving that forward?
Yeah, very much so. So prevention is huge. Obviously, the key is identifying traits that people have, and this gets into genetic coding, but traits that people have that make them more susceptible to type 1 diabetes. So that's where you start. So if you can identify those people and identify the various genetics that lend themselves towards type 1 diabetes, what it allows you to do is focus on what is it that we can do with these groups of people to help prevent the onset of T1D in the first place.
Yeah, that's great. Let's move to some rapid fire. What do you consider your most valuable failure?
Most valuable failure happened when I was 17 years old. Then I was supervising a landscape crew. I told you I was a landscaper. This is when I was in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Yeah. And
I had some guys that were working for me, and we were laying pallets of grass in a yard. And we had about 20 pallets of San Augustine grass to lay down. And the guys that I was working with, it was a crew I'd never worked with before. We brought them in, and they weren't doing it the way that I wanted them to do it. And I fussed at them a little too hard, and they walked off the job. And so I called my boss and I said, look, these guys walked off the job. He came out and he looked at the situation, asked me what had happened, and he recognized that I'd been a little hard on him. And he said, well, I guess you better get busy because you got a lot of grass you're going to have to lay. And so I laid those 20 pallets of grass myself. It took, it was a Friday when that happened. I worked about 14 hours on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because that grass was going to die if it just sat there on the pallet.
Right.
Got all that grass laid in that yard. But what I learned from that, Ben, and that failure, and that was a pivotal failure for me, I think, was you have to figure out a way to get along with people and to lead people. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be nice, but you darn sure shouldn't be ugly, because if you're not careful, you're going to end up laying all that grass yourself. You're going to have to do the job yourself. And the boss that I had, he could have sent additional resources out there to help me out, but he saw that as a valuable opportunity for me to learn. And so what did I learn? Because I was out there for 3 solid days getting all that grass out, and what we could have done in a day if I hadn't run off the crew.
Yeah.
So truly, that was one of my very best failures. I think it was a great leadership lesson, is you have to incentivize people. You have to get people to want to do what you want them to do. You can't just go out there and bark and yell and enforce what you want.
What does an ideal Saturday look like to you?
Well, if Aggie football is involved, it starts there.
Yeah.
So that's one of my but I tell you, probably the way that I spend most of my Saturdays, at least in the early morning, is I go and I ride my horse. And I have a horse up in Hempstead, so I go ride early. But if it were ideal, I'd ride early, get home about lunchtime, have lunch with my wife, maybe go shooting with her, and then go to an evening football game in College Station and watch the Aggies beat the hell out of whoever they're playing. That would be an ideal Saturday for me.
That does sound like a great Saturday. Anyone you'd like to send good bull?
Oh my gosh, there are so many people that like to send good bull, but I tell you, my chief financial officer of Altus Midstream, Ben Rogers, a fine Aggie, a fine gentleman, a fine father, and one hell of a CFO for us at Altus. He's done great things. So, he's pretty special. He's special to the company, but he's a great Aggie, and he's got a very bright future in front of him.
Absolutely. All right. Clay, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you joining us. It is our pleasure to have you on the Maze MasterCast.
Well, Ben, thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. I love being with you guys.
We hope you enjoyed the episode with Clay. For our MasterCast top 3 takeaway, the first thing I wanted to talk about was the culture of Apache to foster a contrarian spirit. I thought that was a really cool, I hear a lot of companies, a lot of organizations say, I don't just want yes people. I want you to tell me if you disagree. But I've never seen it as part of the core values of an organization. Foster a contrarian spirit.
Yes, and it's very specific. It's not contrarianism. There's a specific way that that's worded. First of all, the word foster, rather than cultivate. Why foster rather than cultivate? And if those words, I assume that they were very carefully chosen, and there's sort of the foster a contrarian spirit. What that actually makes me think of is it makes me think of something outdoors. It makes me think of something that is carefully grown, almost the way you would raise a child, for example, foster.
Mm-hmm.
And spirit, I think there's something again there that sort of speaks to the earth, that speaks to something with a very long history that is difficult to contain.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that phrase. It is so specific, and my hat's off to the people, or more likely the group of people that painstakingly crafted that core value. So well done, Apache Corporation.
I like that one too. And you're right that being contrarian can be very negative, but the way that it's written in that phrase, foster a contrarian spirit, makes it sound very positive, and that it's not even contrarian for the sake of contrarian, but it's fostering this spirit that will challenge and say, why are we doing it this way? And could it be safer if we did it this way? Those kinds of things that are really important for an organization. For our second takeaway, I wanted to talk about the experience that Clay had running off the crew that was laying grass for the job that he had. I thought that was such a good story and such a good, valuable failure as something that you would reference back to so many times in your life, right? I don't want them to walk off the job. I want them to be satisfied. I want them to be engaged. I want to motivate and inspire them and not run them off the job where I have to do it all myself. I thought that was so powerful as a reminder, and a quick reminder, just don't run them off the job. It was really cool.
One of the things that I think we've talked about a lot in the last few years is presence. And sometimes presence is just as simple as my butt is in the seat today, or the crew is standing on the place where the job is supposed to happen, and just being there is enough. And it's way better than the alternative. So,
well, and I love that his boss made him lay the sod after the group left, because like he said, his boss could have gotten him some help. And he didn't. He's like, no, you ran him off the job. You figure it out and you work all weekend if that's what it takes. And he did. And clearly working all weekend shows the work ethic he has, because Clay could have walked off the job too.
Sure could have.
But didn't, which is really cool. I loved that story.
Yeah. It's the person who learns the right lesson for that story from that story. That's somebody you want to keep an eye on.
Mm-hmm. Really cool. For our last takeaway, I wanted to just ask you, what do you think has improved for you with everything being virtual? Clay talked about that a lot in the episode, and things that improved for him and for Apache in general. What are some things that have improved for you with being virtual?
I love virtual, and for some people it's been a godsend. For other people, it's been the worst thing that ever happened. For me, I'm kind of chill with whatever. I do think that our process here, for example, with the MasterCast has improved significantly since when we first went entirely virtual. I do look forward to being back in studio in the long term. I think that there is something, especially with guests, there's something about, sitting, even if it's, 6 feet away from someone and looking in their face and being able to see their body language. There's a comfort that you can establish quickly in person in a way that doesn't quite translate from a virtual perspective. Having said that, I love that everyone, my favorite thing is that everyone can use Zoom now. And, if not Zoom, some people are like Microsoft, some people are pushing for Microsoft Teams, which I've not had quite as good an experience there.
Me neither. I'm learning. It has a lot of good features, but the video is not as good.
Yeah. I don't know if, so someone send us an email and tell us, but Microsoft Teams is maybe wants to is headed toward the same place that Slack is headed to, where it's like a one-stop shop for like all your communication and all your project management.
I'd say even
I don't
better
know.
than
Is that what Teams is trying to do?
I think even better than Slack, because to me it's like Slack plus Google Drives, but better because you can edit Microsoft products easier. But Slack plus Google Drive plus Zoom all in one. And to me, it's done really well on the Slack and Google Drive part, but the just video chatting is not as easy to, it's not as easy to see everybody. It's not as clean to see everybody.
Yeah.
But we'll figure it out.
And Zoom itself, of course, is not perfect either. I think the integrations are really strong. For
How
me,
dare you say that? Now we're going to get letters from Zoom. I'm just kidding.
Oh. Zoom, sponsor our show.
Yeah. You're perfect.
But, you do awesome work. I think the thing that is really great about Zoom is it integrates so cleanly into especially Google Calendar. You have to do permissions every time, and I'll do the extra button click. At some point, my guess is they'll probably do away with that, but maybe not. Maybe you'll always have to do it. Regardless, the integrations for Zoom are very clean. One thing, Zoom, I would love to be able to send someone an invite by text instead of having to email myself a Gmail invite, grab my phone, copy the invite, put it into a text message, and then send it. Take out that extra layer for me, please.
Yeah. I don't know how that would work, but I like that idea too. I approve. And I love how you talk to Zoom like they're listening. Zoom.
They are listening. Zoom, hook us up.
They are recording this conversation, I'm sure.
Right.
I'm going to have a hard time losing the efficiencies that we gain with virtual. I 100% get that I'm losing some effectiveness by being virtual. I get that. And I miss it. There are lots of things that I miss, but like driving places again, I'm not into that. I don't want to do it. I'm going to need simultaneous teleportation and the decline of virtual. Like that's how I'm going to need life to work for me.
Zoom, hook us up. All right.
Zoom, teleportation, please.
Yeah. We're having conversations about favorite superpowers here. Let's talk about teleportation. Really, Zoom, if you want a value add, let's be honest. Teleportation is way better than having to send someone an email invite and then text it from your phone. Teleportation, Zoom. That's a good value add. Let's talk about that one.
That's my contribution to the show today is the very groundbreaking recommendation of teleportation.
Yes. The Maze MasterCast, ladies and gentlemen. We're glad we're here.
On that note, would you like to close us with a quote?
I would love to close us with a quote. Finis coronat opus. Ovid. The end crowns the work.
I don't even know what that means.
It means it's hard to judge something when it's still in process. Like oftentimes Amazon will post unprofitable quarter after unprofitable quarter, and everybody says, can Amazon ever really get there? But oftentimes they do. They do.
Probably not always that patient. The end crowns the work. Yeah,
probably not.
That was the quote?
Yep.
The end crowns the work.
Yeah. Finis coronat opus.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.
Looking to start a podcast? Trying to tackle questions like, how do I record? How do I edit? How can I get music for my show? What equipment do I need? How do I distribute it? Good news. The podcast architects are here to help. Whether that's from start to finish, fixing the audio quality, helping you get the episodes posted, go to podconsulting.co. Everyone has something worth sharing with the world.